Hello and welcome to the Walk Around podcast powered by JM&A Group. If you are in the automotive business, this is the place for you. Whether you're in sales, service, finance, fixed operations, whether you're just starting your automotive career or you're a dealer owner, you're sure to learn something about the automotive business. I am Mark Spoto, and I'll be joined by Elliot Shore, my co-host, and today we are talking with Jason Stein. Jason is the CEO of Flat 6 Media and host of Cars and Culture with Jason Stein, which you can hear 4 times a week on SiriusXM channel 132 or wherever you get podcasts that you listen to. And Jason was just a fantastic conversation when you think about his career and everything he has experienced back in his days as a journalist, as an editor, all the way up into publisher of Automotive News, and now as the host of a nationally syndicated radio show when it comes to cars and culture overall. So Jason was just really entertaining. He kept us laughing, and we learned a lot from him and his takes on the business. So let's take a walk around with Jason Stein. Well, we are thrilled to have Jason Stein back with us on the walk around. Jason, welcome back. How are you doing?
Jason?
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to be with you guys. Elliot, Mark, wonderful.
So the last time you were with us, as we all know.
Yeah, lots changed.
Lots changed.
Lots changed in your world, Jason. Just a little bit,
A couple of things have changed.
Yeah.
You were the publisher of Automotive News and, just kind of the head of this automotive media empire. And here you are now, the host of your own Cars and Culture show on SiriusXM. And you had promised us more of an unvarnished Jason Stein when you came on the podcast. So we're really excited to hear from you now that you've gone to this transition of being your own one-man show, so to speak. What has that been like? Just tell us a little bit about this journey since you've become this host and you have your own show now.
Did we say unvarnished or unpolished? Did I
Either way
the
works.
Unpolished version? Right. Let's go with the slightly buffed version.
There you go.
No, it's great to be with you guys, and obviously things have changed a lot since we talked last time, and I enjoyed being on the program then, and I enjoy being on the program now. And just to put it into a bit of a nutshell, yeah, I was 18 years at my former employer, and the final 8 as the publisher of Automotive News, and the Crane family has been so just wonderful pillars of the media world, and I loved working with them. I had the chance to really try some new things, some things I never thought that I would experience. You know, when you get the chance to move your family to Munich, which I did for
Sure.
4 years, a true expat experience. Got a chance to see the world, the countless number of. I think I'm still suffering jet lag from the Beijing, Shanghai auto shows that I would go to on a regular basis. But no, it was incredibly rewarding, and the relationships have been very fruitful and everlasting. But it was time for a new opportunity, and I think one that I would not have anticipated. There was an idea that was put together between me and the folks at Liberty Media, which own and operate SiriusXM, and they also own Formula One and the Atlanta Braves, and just a small organization based out of Denver.
Oh, that little company.
So Greg Maffei and I, who's the CEO, we crafted an idea on a napkin in a bar in Denver. It was basically like, let's talk about culture and passion and the automobile, but not from the business to business perspective, which of course I had spent 18 years doing. Let's talk about it more from the consumer perspective. I probably could have filled 5 to 10 years of shows interviewing B2B people who I knew, because of course,
Sure.
as you know, they were our world. But I really wanted to expand that out, and Greg supported it wholeheartedly and gave me a 6-part pilot, which if I would have known then, I'm not sure that I would have ventured down that road, because they told me that 91% of the 6-part pilots fail. They didn't tell me any of that. And so when I recorded my first 6 guests, they said, we love this. We want this to be an annual contract. And the first,
Awesome.
some of the first 6 guests were folks you may have heard of: Mark Wahlberg, Jay Leno, Roger Penske, Chrissy Taylor of Enterprise, John Elway.
Wow.
They were, I mean, I pulled on every relationship string I could think of to put those together. And then they said, okay, well, great. Now you can do 52 of them. And I went, okay, how's this going to work? And the bottom line, is it's all turned out extremely well. And what I've really learned is, not unlike the automotive B2B business, the automotive passion-filled, gasoline in your veins world that exists is just as interconnected as the world that we know. So, Mark Wahlberg led to Tony Vinciquerra, the head of Sony Pictures, and Tony Vinciquerra led to Michael Strahan. And, all of a sudden you just pull on this string of this passion. And all of a sudden you're talking to Jay Ward, who is at Pixar, as part of the Cars family.
Wow.
And then that leads to Bob Ingram, who has the largest Porsche collection in America. And then, that leads to discussions that are ongoing now about getting Jerry Seinfeld. So what I realized is that web is just as tight in the B2C world, or in this automotive passion world, as it was in the B2B world. It's just different. And just, a lot of car dealers and a lot of automakers know some pretty interesting people. So actors, athletes, musicians, race car drivers, race car owners. I've talked to Richard Childress. I mentioned, Roger, already. I talked to Joe Gibbs. I mean, it's crazy how connected this world is.
So Jason, it's really interesting to hear, and your take on, really taking the car business outside of the car business, and seeing that passion, throughout the world in media, popular entertainment, social culture. But I guess the question I have is, what is that thread? I'm curious, right? It's funny. We go back 5 years, and we'll touch on this in a second, where, the rise of the shared autonomous electric vehicle was going to kill the soul of the auto business. And it was all going to be a big commodity. And, what I hear you saying is the soul of the auto industry is alive and well. Is that right? What is that thread that unites us all? Celebrity, auto industry professional, around that magical vehicle. What is it?
It's true. It's just the passion for cars. People love their cars. People love their first cars. They love their latest car. They love the fact that they can take a good amount of the wealth that they've accumulated and pour it into a car collection. If I think of Michael Strahan, I mean, he's got about $3 million worth of vehicles.
Wow.
He started off with one car, a Toyota Supra Turbo, when he signed with the Giants, and a Hall of Fame career later, and Good Morning America, and $100,000 Pyramid, and Fox NFL Sunday, and now he's that collection is just larger and larger and larger, and it all goes back to just this visceral thing that I think all of us feel. Those of us who are car people, and it's not just transportation, but who really appreciate the design and the power and the performance. And what cars do is they effectively unite the world, and that's where you see the cars and coffee gatherings now that have popped up on a regular basis, which were never around when I was a kid. So it's great, and I think of my own 17-year-old son who loves any kind of new vehicle that's on the road and is very passionate about those vehicles. So you're right, Elliot. It's not the electric cars, which I know we're going to talk about, will come, and of course we're in or are on their way, and there is a transition. But there'll be other things about that we just really appreciate as car people, and whether it's the unique ability to design an interior differently now, but all of the thread, to answer your question, the thread that goes throughout all of those 70 guests, that I've been able to have on the program, is that they all just care a ton about vehicles and transportation. And I would even tell you, one of my guests, who was the co-creator of the iPhone, Tony Fidel, is interested in transportation. He's interested in mobility. He's interested in what the world looks like from a mobility standpoint. So we stretch it a little bit too, and we focus just as much on culture. And of course, what couldn't be more culturally relevant than the iPhone? But we also then bring it back around to vehicles, transportation, mobility. And Greg Maffei at Liberty really felt that there was no one out there doing that. We still believe there isn't really anybody out there who's focused in on those specific topics the way that we are. And you can tell I'm on the radio because I can barely get a sentence out.
So, Jason, you talked about that passion as a thread and how much you care. And, even if you're not Michael Strahan, you can have an emotional connection with your vehicle. And to me, that leads toward the belief that as a dealer in this business, your business model is going to be here for a long time coming. Building off of what Elliot said in terms of how autonomy and shared vehicles may kind of wipe out the dealer model. But as people continue to have such an emotional connection with vehicles, they're going to need that in-person experience. And if you're a dealer, you should feel positive about the future. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that, Mark. I think dealers especially have, over the course of the last 2 years, have proven even more essential. Of course, they were deemed essential by the government, but even more essential from a consumer standpoint. And look, these cars are getting more technologically capable, not less, which requires somebody to explain exactly what it is that you're buying, to walk you through the process, to be there for you and with you when you need service, or if you want aftermarket parts, or if your over-the-air update doesn't work, because there's no guarantee that that's going to happen either effectively.
Sure.
So dealers, I think, have a very long run, and on the technology and the EV side, there's been some pretty big proclamations, and you said unvarnished, so we can go after it a little bit.
Here we go.
But here we go. Drum roll, please, on this.
Right.
No, I mean, there are the automakers out there talking about the fact that EVs are going to be, replacing internal combustion engines within 5 years, and we're not going to be producing any more ICE vehicles, and it's just a flip of a switch. And let's face it, that's just not true. I mean, that might motivate stock prices, and it might, although of late that doesn't seem to matter either. For a while it did, but the real truth is, many of those proclamations were made and predictions were made based on the fact that let's not make these Detroit car companies look so stale and stagnant, and the obsession that exists around Tesla. Well, we're cool too. And how are we cool? Well, we're going to produce all these EVs, and we're going to have more features, and we're better than Tesla. And don't look at Tesla. And maybe they should really stop talking about Tesla and just focusing on their own businesses, because the obsession is real. And this goes back a long way. I mean, 10 years ago, I was talking to automotive executives who the only thing they wanted to know was what Tesla was doing. What are you hearing about Tesla? What's the latest on Tesla? And yes, he has created a model that has been successful at some levels, but it's also had a healthy hand up in order to make it work from the beginning. But there are a lot of established car companies with a huge network of franchise auto dealers across the country who are coming with their own versions of those vehicles that will be just as good, if not better.
Right.
So let's stop obsessing about Elon Musk, and let's just focus on our own business. And if you produce great vehicles, yes, I know you're going to need to be perceived as being cool, which is pretty hard to do, as a marketing ploy.
Yeah.
You're already going to have that infrastructure that's built in. And to go back to the dealer part of the question, the dealers will be there to service the customers who need to be serviced, and they will be there to help them along in this journey of understanding how the EV works versus your internal combustion engine vehicle. So it's already a built-in advantage over Tesla, which, if you look at some of the rankings, J.D. Power as an example, Tesla buyers are extremely satisfied the moment that they click the app and they order the car, and then the car at some point arrives. They're extremely dissatisfied when they try to service the vehicle or any kind of consumer satisfaction level that is way post sale. So in my mind, it's almost like you're dating the perfect partner who looks great and treats you really horribly during the relationship.
Well, that's a great analogy.
That's a great analogy.
And then to further that analogy, and they're the only game in town right now.
Right.
So yeah, you're going to take the abuse, right? You don't have a choice. But in the next year, I think there's over 100 new EV models coming out that aren't Teslas. And so will the customer base still have that enthusiasm, when they now have options to sell?
Elliot, Tesla has been living in, just to continue the analogy, one inappropriate step further, Tesla has been living in a town with very, very ugly people. And they look great.
Right.
So, the town's about to get a lot prettier.
No, but well, that's good. I'm picturing a town of Teslas.
Do you have a town in mind?
I do have a visual in my head there, but no, it's funny because you really hit on something. Mark and I were talking about this just an hour ago, literally, and we were contrasting two who I would call probably two of the most influential traditional manufacturers that there are. And it looks like they're going in completely opposite directions. And what we're talking about here were Akio Toyoda and Jim Farley. Akio Toyoda and Toyota had their dealer meeting. A lot of news came out about it. And what was very interesting about the news from Toyota coming out just recently was that they seem to be doubling down on their dealer body and not doubling down on EVs. And then you contrast this with the news coming out of Ford. And whereas they seem to be doubling down on EVs and doubling down against their dealer body. And here you have Ford and Toyota, right? Jim Farley and Akio Toyoda coming at it from what seems to be different planets. What do you make of that?
Well, what I would say about Toyota is, and you both know this, we all know this, they take the long road, no matter what that road is. And I'll never forget having dinner with Jim Lentz and Bob Carter when the news came out that they were moving from California. And Jim Lentz said, look, Akio told me, look down the road 50 years. What does it look like 50 years from now? What does it look like 100 years from now? It's that kind of long-term, forward-thinking, calm ease, and ease of an approach. Yeah. It's not a panic. It is certainly not an obsession over what Elon Musk is doing.
Right.
And the view is we don't exactly know how consumers are going to or where they're going to gravitate in the future as it relates to powertrain. Because that's all we're talking about is powertrain. And if there's a fuel cell infrastructure that's built out, if there's an entrepreneurial spirit in America around fuel cells where stations now all of a sudden start to pop up, that becomes much less of a concern. Three of us sit currently in Florida. Sure. The Hurricane Ian that went through here, recently, obviously knocked out one thing. And I heard this from somebody who needed to get somewhere, and it was gas stations. And it was electricity. There are opportunities to go into alternative fuels that Toyota is pursuing. And I think they're taking a very slow, measured, long-term, that 50-year, 100-year approach to say, we don't know where it's going to end up, but wherever the consumer goes, we will go. We will offer a range of options. And again, I'm a believer that hybrids were the right answer anyway. Why do we have to throw everything out and say, okay, we're going to get rid of the gas engine. We're going just with electric. And this goes for a lot of companies, not just Ford. And the perils of that. And by the way, Ford also said they were getting out of sedans. Toyota said, okay, well, we're going to stay with this little hot seller called the Camry that you may have heard of.
Right.
And we're going to offer sedans and we're going to offer options. And I think the other thing too is, the danger in going too far down one road is that you can't go back. And look at the average price of a vehicle right now is at record levels. And we've been saying, by the way, I've been saying record levels in speeches that I've been giving for probably 10 years. Every year is a record level. You're going to force the middle class buyer, the first time buyer, or even the second time buyer out of the market based on affordability. You eliminate sedans, you go all in on EVs, you go completely in on this technology. And what if the consumer doesn't want it? What if they can't afford it? You've got to have other options. So I like what Akio Toyota has done. I like the fact that they are pursuing their own path in a very I would say patient approach.
Right.
And of course, because it's the way that Toyota does it. And I think there are many companies pursuing that stock market game and that obsessive game to try to figure it all out.
Yeah.
You know,
take me back a second to your publishing days. Were there times where there would be news about to come out and there would be execs that would say to you, Jason, you can't write it that way. My stock price is going to tank. and you know, were you inclined to oblige? And maybe you can't answer that, right? But because you have to maintain your journalistic integrity, I'm sure. But did that happen? You think that stuff happened, Mark?
Of course it does.
It must,
of course
right?
It does.
No one came to me personally and asked me to not run a story. What I will, and by the way, we never, ever held a story or didn't run a story or spiked a story for that reason. But no. It's not. It's funny what I hear afterwards is now you know a year plus later, I hear people say to me, "Oh, well, that Automotive News is obviously writing about that person or that company based on the advertising that they're given." The bottom line is that never happened while I was there. I mean, I had the director of editorial operations, Dave Versicle, who many on this show would know well. Dave was at Automotive News for 25 years. He hired me back in 2003. Later on, we ended up, you know, we were partners. He ran the editorial side. I ran the editorial side and the sales side. Dave, there would be no way that I would even get that through Dave, even if I wanted it. There would be no way.
Wow.
So that never happened.
But that doesn't mean people don't want it to happen, right?
Oh, of course.
Elliott's question was, has anyone tried?
Not to me personally. I mean, you know, I'm sure reporters get pressured all the time. In fact, I know they do. I know editors get pressured all the time. The beautiful part about Automotive News is that it's almost like the Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg. We actually modeled ourselves off of both from a source standpoint, sourcing of stories, from an integrity standpoint, because those guys are the gold standard, and we considered we were the gold standard as well. We are the gold standard. They are the gold standard. Right. What I will tell you, fine, you want to drudge up something. We did find, I'm going to withhold the name because that's just, you know, you got to, it's weird being on this side of the world now, I got to tell you, but we had a scoop on an announcement that was going to come out where an automaker had to restate some of its previously public statements around fuel economy for a certain vehicle. And I received a phone call. So I guess this kind of answers your question. And the phone call was not, hey, our stock price is going to tank, or wow, you're really going to destroy our company if you run the story. But the phone call was, well, let me offer you the opportunity, if you'll wait, an opportunity to speak to one of our senior executives about this. He's not available right now, but we'll make him available in the future. But I'd like you to hold the story. We ran the story, and you know, the rest is history.
That's right. Pretty funny.
We'll be Googling that later to find out. So
all the different combinations of, you know,
that's a lot of fuel
that's
economy. Gonna be a tough one.
That's going to be a tough one to try to figure out. I'll just tell you that right now.
Jason, let's go back a little bit, you know, and take us, you know, kind of using the dealer's lens with this, in terms of, you mentioned how, you know, a dealer's business is going to be relevant for a long time. But that doesn't mean they should be looking at maintaining their status quo. right? So let's talk about how a dealer can stay relevant and try to get that Tesla type experience that is so highly valued and that customers love.
Well, the website experience.
Yeah, for sure. And what are some things or investments or business models that they should be thinking about to stay relevant as these new vehicles come out and customers have a variety of choice and maintain that emotional connection and relationship with their customers? What are some things that you've seen that they should be doing?
Well, the good dealers, the ones who I'm in touch with on a regular basis and who actually informally or formally get together quarterly, and there is a group, a so-called super group that does get together, and most in that small group are very good friends of mine, so they share that experience with me. They are constantly learning from each other. They are on the cutting edge. They bring in esteemed speakers. They are always learning. They're always sharing. They're always willing to question their business model, try new business models, think, examine, educate. They're not worried about the monthly close. Now, most in this group have been around for a long time, and most have well north of 30 to 40, in some cases, rooftops. They are constantly reinventing the way that they do business by challenging the way that they do business. They are the big thinkers. They are very analytical, and they're willing to admit when they're wrong about something. But most importantly, they're willing to try certain things. So they'll look at I think of 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, they brought in Carvana as a guest speaker just to understand their Carvana model at the time, which 3 years ago looked like a pretty interesting model. Not so sure right now. Mm-hmm. But there is a real willingness to dig deep on important subjects, to think about other industries, to consider the technology leaders and the trendsetters, and then to get close with them, to understand how they're doing what they're doing. Those are, I think, probably, that's one method of trying to stay ahead of the curve, because you're simply learning from the best. And again, I say it's informal because they all just get together based on their own schedules. They all get together collectively, but this is not a manufacturer force thing. It's not a 20 group. It's not, right. It is outside the lines. And it is all driven by the interest and willingness to become better leaders in their own fields. And they soak it all up. This is not a trip to Las Vegas for another dealer meeting. This is a special offsite education session. And so I think of that as an example. That's one shining example of that ability to broaden their own horizons and to stretch themselves. Yeah. And that's just down to continuous learning, right? That's all that is.
Well, and I think there's a nuance in there that I heard that I think is maybe a little different, in the sense that, a dealer goes to a 20 group, it's around 20 very like-minded individuals or people, right? And so you're almost like creating your group think. Yep. And so I think what you're describing is a bit different than that, right? In the sense that go look outside your walls, go look at what people who are challenging the norms do, listen to them, learn from them, right? Don't get stuck in your...
learn from each other.
Right. Yeah. And that in and of itself is a great practice for any dealer, or really anyone in business. I mean, it's great advice for anyone, really.
Yeah, I agree. Yep. It's just self-challenge, right? That's all it is.
For sure. For sure.
So, Jason, tell us some other things you may be hearing in the industry, some interesting tidbits that you might have now that you sit on this unique position of trying to mix cars and culture, but yet you're still very connected and you have relationships with so many people across the industry. Any other interesting items that you're seeing, trends that you can share?
Yeah, Mark, the labor shortage and the logistics shortage is not going away. And so I think we sat here for a long time thinking, okay, well, that's just COVID. We'll get through that. And, by the end of 2022, we'll be back to normalized production, normalized inventory, kind of back to the old ways of doing things. I'm hearing that this is another year out at least, primarily because you have some critical components that cannot be built now. And these are just, this is all one big supply chain, right? When you think about the raw material and steel all the way to the car rolling off the auction block, if you will, and everything in between. But some basic componentry at the tier 1 supplier level or even tier 2 supplier level that cannot be met because there is a shortage of raw material X or Y that is now, unavailable in the world. So now that holds up the entire thing. So you have those logistical supply chain issues. We all know in our personal lives, and we see it in various ways, that the labor shortage continues to be a real situation. Again, we thought that was just a COVID thing. The fact that I guess nobody really wants to work anymore, and they're collecting money from other sources. I think people have just left. They've just left the workforce. Yeah. And there was a good McKinsey study that was out recently about the shortage of that, and the Great Resignation, and the fact that people's values have just shifted. They're perhaps during COVID and a bit of a recalibration of what life really meant for everybody.
For sure. You start to hear from these younger generations too, all these new phrases like quiet quitting.
Yes.
Have you heard that one? It's so quiet quitting is basically doing the bare minimum, but not telling anyone you're doing the bare minimum. So you're just essentially
right. So slacking off.
Correct. That's what we used to call it.
I've been doing that for years.
But the younger generation calls it quiet quitting. Yeah. And then there's also something called fast quitting. Have you heard of that one?
I have not heard of that one.
Apparently that's a new one too, where you just leave and don't come back.
I don't know. I don't know what's happening exactly. I don't know how we fall into this level. I mentioned my son earlier. My daughter is 21, senior in final stages of her senior year of college, and they both have 2 or 3 jobs that they're doing on their own. Wow. I don't tell them to go and work, and there have got to be students and kids and young adults and even adults in their 30s who, I know they all want another title, and I know they want an extra grand or two, to prove that they belong there. And I mean, it's certainly a different. I'm a Gen Xer. There's certainly a different generational mindset. I'll admit that I probably didn't really realize was as acute as it is until I lived through it in dealing with a lot of that segment of the generational pool.
Sure.
I hate to say, I don't consider myself to be that old, but it's kind of like, wow, where did work ethic go? Like, how did that just disappear all of a sudden? How about just doing a good job? How about not needing an additional title? How about not needing a raise after 3 months? After the last raise you got 3 months prior. I mean, those are the real, go back to Mark's question, the labor shortage issue, particularly in the supply base, which nobody really talks about very much, but also at the dealer level too. Right. I mean, you got a technician that knows how to fix a certain level of technology in the service bay, and you want to tell them that he or she needs to work, X hours longer. They may just quiet quit or fast quit, because they'll go down the street and they'll make more money because the demand for that is so high. And again, the demand for vehicles is so high, remains so high, even during these macroeconomic, pressure-filled times. And by the way, there is the belief that demand is going to maintain. It's going to be strong for another year. We're going to be in this situation of needing and looking for cars for at least another 12 to 18 months. So I don't think we're going back to the days of, it's funny, March of 2020, when NADA took place. The headlines on the front page of Automotive News that week, the week of NADA, were $7,500 off a Jeep Gladiator, right? Because they couldn't get rid of them. I mean, it was unbelievable, and pressure on for autonomous vehicle or ride sharing or car sharing. I mean, all that stuff is kind of faded away to some extent.
So much has changed.
Yeah,
much has changed. A very quick period of time.
No doubt. No, it really is amazing. We were comparing some headlines, and I think the labor shortage is something that's been a theme for us on the show here.
Definitely.
And really, we've had a couple of kind of recruiting and teams experts outside the automotive industry that have shared that this labor shortage is beyond the auto industry, and it's going to be a challenge. And talking about retention of your people being critical to success.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
critical at every level.
Speaking of themes, is it time for a sure thing?
Oh, I think it is, Mark.
So, Jason,
this is the moment, right?
This is the moment.
You got it.
I've heard about this.
It's sweeping the nation.
It's sweeping
the sure
the nation.
thing.
The sure thing.
That's right.
Okay, so this is where our Elliot Shore here gives us a few hot takes, and we ask our guest, you, Jason Stein, to validate or challenge Elliot's hot takes here by answering the question, sure thing or not a sure thing.
That's right.
So Elliot, let's take it away.
Yeah, we have a very special edition of Sure Thing, Not a Sure Thing today. And I'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
But,
all right.
we talked a little bit, we danced around it a little bit. You mentioned the iPhone, and I did have a question prepared around that. And I believe that that Apple will have an Apple car, maybe called the iCar, who knows, out by 2030. So we sit here, it's 2022. I believe in the next 8 years, you will be able to buy an Apple iCar. Sure thing or not a sure thing?
So we're gonna come back in 8 years and say whether or not I'm right? You guys
whether I'm right,
promising to have me on the show in 2030?
For sure.
Oh, hey,
is that a sure thing or not a sure thing?
Part 3 just to dive into the generational and where did the work ethic go? I want to go back to that for a second, but yeah, we will definitely have you back in 8 years to validate this.
I feel like we're like playing the game of like have you ever, which of course is the next show, right? Yeah.
Right.
No. Not a sure thing.
I think.
See? How much do I differ from my previous from your previous guest?
So why do you think?
Yeah,
I mean, I think Apple has been so somewhat focused, I would say, but there's been a lot of press on what they're working on. Why do you think that's not the case?
I think it's up. I think it's been very up and down, Mark. I think they've had executives join the team. They've had executives leave the team. Here's the reason why. Because it's a sure thing that cars are difficult to manufacture. Very difficult. The car business is a hard business to get into. And what you're going to see is, there are many out there, the VinFasts and the Lucids and
perfect transition to the next question.
Of course, the Teslas. But
Jason,
yes.
It's like you have my next sure thing.
It's right here. All right. So that's
unbelievable.
Jason, I like to keep score up for Elliot here, just so he knows.
Right. Mark really enjoys it. So he really enjoys.
You're 0 for 1. 0 for 1. Let's try to get a double or.
Because you predicted where I'm going to land. Okay.
Well, that's pretty interesting because yes, we did. So the next question on a sure thing is, so you mentioned them actually. There are a lot of new OEM entrants into the automotive space. Some of them have very big stock prices. Amazingly, haven't produced a vehicle, but yet they have these
and falling. And
some of them, and I don't want to call anyone out. We have a lot of listeners, as you can imagine, and all of our friends are friends, and so. But you do have a lot of companies out there: Rivian, Lucid, Lordstown. You got VinFast, right? Fisker, DeLorean making a comeback.
DeLorean.
Yep. And so you have all these companies and they all want to build EVs and be successful. And we know that's really hard. But I believe that 2 out of those companies I just mentioned will not ever produce a vehicle that you can buy commercially on the market. I believe two of the EV OEM entrants will never end up producing a vehicle. Sure thing or not a sure thing?
And you're not going to name the 2?
I can't do it.
Thank you for asking me to not name them.
Yes, we're just saying any 2.
Out of the pool, there will be at least 2 who do not produce. 2 will not produce a vehicle. A single vehicle.
Now, whether they go bankrupt, whether they get bought, whether they just fizzle out, whatever. I'm not being specific about that, but I'm just saying two manufacturers who intend to create and sell vehicles will not be able to do so.
Because they will go away. Not that they won't
Yes.
produce vehicles, but that they'll just go away.
They'll go away.
Oh, that's 100% a sure thing.
Oh,
all right.
I should have gone
Came
harder.
back.
Yeah.
He came back.
Yeah. And I won't ask you to name who you think they are, but it's interesting. It's definitely an interesting space. Anyone who's surprised you, let's just throw it out. Let's forget about negative. Anyone who's surprised you from a positive perspective on the new EV entrance.
Lucid's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I mentioned earlier that I have interviewed Tony Vinciquerra, the chairman and CEO of Sony Pictures. Tony loves his Lucid. He loves his Lucid.
Interesting.
And there's a gentleman with a pretty high professional profile who could choose to drive anything that he would like. And he is crazy about it. I saw the latest incarnation at the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance in August.
Right.
And it is stunningly beautiful. They perform exceptionally well. There's a lot of momentum, a lot of money, a lot of interest behind Lucid. And I think if there's any brand that can give Tesla a run for its money in limited production, they're not going to start making F-150 volume here.
For sure. Yeah.
But definitely Lucid is a very serious player. What's interesting about VinFast, they're putting a lot of money behind this brand in America. I mean, somebody has opened the checkbook like you have. Here are a couple of examples. The New York Auto Show, right. They were plastered everywhere at the New York Auto Show. They had one of the biggest stands that I've ever seen in this day and age. Of course, a lot of mainstream automakers moving away from that. The second example is the fact that they have flown every journalist, vendor, hanger-on, next-door neighbor to their headquarters in Vietnam to show them their capabilities. And my good friend Jeff Holland is the head of PR there, and he is on a plane to Vietnam about every 2 weeks as he chartering people over there to tell the VinFast story. I've been invited 3 times. I couldn't go any one of those times. But they are putting a ton of money behind the marketing of this effort.
Yeah, no, I've read a bit about VinFast. It's a huge company. I mean, Vingroup is the biggest group out of Vietnam, biggest company in Vietnam. I think you're right. And I looked at what they were doing in California. They opened a bunch of retail spots. Seems like they're going to have actual dealership kind of like locations with service centers. It looks like they've studied Tesla and are not going to make that mistake.
Exactly right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
The
You're
other
right,
thing,
Elliot.
Jason, that's interesting about them and something that dealers can really start to pay attention to is they're really trying to get that customer experience as perfect and as frictionless as possible. So I think that's good for our industry to challenge that aspect and make sure as a dealer, you should be meeting the customer where they are and what they need to do to purchase your product.
I agree with you.
All right, we got one more. We got one more left. Now, Jason, everyone knows you're Canadian, right?
Does everyone know that?
Well, they do now. And let me tell you, there has been a ton of Canadian entertainment talent that has come to the United States and become popular. Just an amazing amount of people. I mean, look at some of these names. I mean, just look. Bryan Adams, right? Alanis Morissette.
Wait a second. You lead with Bryan Adams? When's the last time he's been relevant?
Summer of '69.
Okay.
Come on.
Right.
Now that's a great
He's on tour right now across Canada. Yes,
that is true.
Surprisingly.
In Canada. Okay.
Right. But listen to some more.
Let's
Shania Twain. Keanu Reeves.
Yes.
Kiefer Sutherland, Jim Carrey, Justin Bieber. Right. I mean, the list goes on and on. There is
Gordon Lightfoot.
There you go. I mean, the list goes on and on. But of all the talent that I read about coming out of Canada, there is one talent to me that rises to the top. And so I believe that the most talented entertainer to ever come out of Canada is the Michael J. Fox. That's right.
Michael J. Fox.
That's right. That Back to the Future.
Teen Wolf.
Yeah. I believe those to be some of the finest entertainment out there ever. Okay. So Michael J. Fox is my guy. best Canadian entertainer of all time. Sure thing or not a
Can
sure
I give
thing?
you my guy before Jason?
Okay,
Okay.
fine.
I got a couple names too.
I'm going to go with John Candy.
Wow.
Yeah, that was the one I was going to mention. And you could also throw Dan Aykroyd in there too.
That's correct.
Oh, that.
All right. So, Jason, let's go back to Elliot. A sure thing or not a sure thing as Michael J. Fox as the top Canadian entertainer?
I love Back to the Future. What can I say?
Well, he was driving a car, so I guess that's important for this show,
right?
Which is helpful.
You mentioned DeLorean.
That's right.
He made the DeLorean.
Mentioned DeLorean. I mean, you've got a double mention there. And let's not forget. Was it Full House? Is that what he was on?
No, it was.
What was
it was a great show though.
The TV show.
Oh my gosh, we're drawing blanks.
we're all drawing.
I know. He was Alex Keating.
Alex P. Keaton.
Yeah,
Alex P. Keaton, and the show was called. I don't know. No, not a sure thing. It's actually terrible. I would probably go with if you're talking about entertainment and you mentioned all forms of entertainment. I think the greatest entertainer who I've ever watched in my lifetime, in person too, was Wayne Gretzky.
Wayne Gretzky. He went sports.
Good. He went sports.
I mean, how can you argue with the great one?
Yeah.
He was poetry in motion. He's one of the greatest athletes ever. He won multiple cups. He pitched car dealerships in South Florida and on the West Coast in California. Worked with my buddy Mike Maroney from Auto Nation. And I think he was the greatest entertainer of all time. And Canadians, they prefer to stay under the radar, honestly. So there are probably many Canadians who you don't know who have achieved incredible things. In fact, I'll give you one more. As an entertainer purely on television was Alex Trebek.
Interesting.
See, Canadians only know the famous Canadians. That's the beauty of it.
So it's funny you should say I did have a little bonus round there, but it was people who are Canadian that you wouldn't actually think are in fact Canadian. So funny you should say that. Pamela Anderson, Canadian.
Did not know that.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
She made a name for herself.
That's right. Ryan Gosling. Canadian. Lauren Michaels. We did mention some very famous comedians coming out of Canada. Lauren Michaels, the great
I think I did know
Saturday Night Live creator. And then last but not least, and I think this is cheating a little bit, but The Rock. The Rock
is Canadian.
Is a Canadian citizen. He was not born in Canada, but his father is Canadian, and in 2009 he did become a dual citizen of the United States.
I'll give you one more for my bonus round. You guys wouldn't know this. We talked about him a lot on this program. Elon Musk is a Canadian.
Wow. I don't think I knew that.
No,
his mother, I believe, his mother and father at one point were in Saskatchewan. I think he was born in Saskatchewan and moved to South Africa as a very young child. Still holds a Canadian passport, I believe.
Wow. Very interesting.
Well, tune in to episode 3 of the Walk Around Jason Stein. Who's Canadian and who's not Canadian? We'll do a bonus episode. Jason, this has been an awesome interview. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Thank you.
And the insights that you continue to collect. And best of luck on the show. We are listeners. We are fans.
Channel 132.
132
have it
on
preset.
SiriusXM radio. And wherever you get podcasts, you will find Jason Stein. Thank you so much.
You need to trail out of this interview with the theme song from Titanic, My Heart Will Go On by Canadian Lean Beyond. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, Jason.